Ridge. Marcus Thornfield had been tracking the massive brown bear for 3 days through the dense Alaskan wilderness when everything went wrong. The seasoned wildlife photographer had come to Kodiak Island to capture the legendary giants in their natural habitat, but now he found himself witnessing something far more dramatic than any photo could capture. The bear, a magnificent male weighing nearly 800 pounds, had been separated from his usual territory by an unprecedented wildfire that had swept through the region 2 weeks prior. The flames had consumed thousands of acres, leaving behind a charred wasteland where once abundant salmon streams and berry patches had thrived. Now, with winter approaching and his food sources destroyed, the bear faced the ultimate test of survival. Thornfield watched from his concealed position as the bear, whom he'd mentally named Goliath, methodically searched the burned landscape for any remaining sustenance. The animal's thick brown coat, normally glossy and full, showed signs of stress and malnutrition. His ribs were becoming visible beneath the fur, and his movements, while still powerful, carried a desperate urgency. The first challenge came at dawn on the fourth day. Goliath had discovered a partially burned berry bush and was carefully extracting what few edible berries remained when a pack of wolves appeared on the ridge above. These weren't ordinary wolves. They were a displaced pack, also driven from their territory by the fire. And they were just as hungry and desperate as the bear. The alpha wolf, a gray female with intelligent yellow eyes, led her pack of 6 down the slope with calculated precision. They had clearly been tracking Goliath, waiting for the right moment to challenge him for any food source they could find. In normal circumstances, a healthy brown bear would easily intimidate a wolf pack, but these weren't normal circumstances. Goliath rose to his full height, nearly 9 feet tall, and released a thunderous roar that echoed across the valley. The wolves hesitated but didn't retreat. Hunger had made them bold, and they began to circle the bear with practiced coordination. The alpha female darted in first, snapping at Goliath's hindquarters while 2 other wolves moved to flank him from the opposite side. The bear's survival instincts kicked into overdrive. Rather than standing his ground and fighting all 7 wolves simultaneously, Goliath made a strategic decision that would define his chances of survival. He charged directly at the alpha female, using his massive size and speed to break through their formation. The wolf barely escaped his powerful swipe, and the pack momentarily scattered. But Goliath didn't stop to fight. Instead, he continued his charge up the rocky slope, using his superior climbing ability to reach terrain where the wolves would be at a disadvantage. The pack pursued him for nearly a mile before finally giving up, their energy too precious to waste on such a difficult hunt. Exhausted but victorious, Goliath found himself on a high ridge overlooking a valley he'd never explored before. As he caught his breath, his keen nose detected something promising: the scent of water, and more importantly, the distinctive smell of salmon. Following his instincts, he began the treacherous descent into the unknown valley. The journey down proved more dangerous than the wolf encounter. The fire had destabilized much of the terrain, and loose rocks frequently gave way under his massive weight. Twice, Goliath nearly fell into deep crevices hidden by ash and debris. His powerful claws, designed for digging and climbing, became his lifeline as he carefully navigated the unstable landscape. After hours of careful descent, Goliath reached the valley floor and discovered his prize, a small stream that had somehow escaped the fire's destruction. The water ran clear and cold, fed by an underground spring that had protected it from the devastation above. More importantly, the stream was teeming with late-season salmon making their final spawning run. But the bear's relief was short-lived. As he approached the water's edge, he realized he wasn't alone. A mother brown bear with two cubs had already claimed this territory. She was smaller than Goliath, but fiercely protective, and she immediately positioned herself between him and her young ones, warning him away with aggressive posturing and vocalizations. This presented Goliath with a moral and survival dilemma. He could easily overpower the female and drive her away, claiming the rich fishing grounds for himself. But doing so would likely doom her and her cubs to starvation. The bear's intelligence, one of the species' most remarkable traits, allowed him to process this complex situation. Instead of fighting, Goliath demonstrated the sophisticated social behavior that brown bears are capable of when survival depends on cooperation rather than competition. He slowly backed away from the prime fishing spot and moved upstream, where the salmon were less abundant but still present. His body language clearly communicated his peaceful intentions to the mother bear. The female, recognizing that Goliath posed no immediate threat to her cubs, gradually relaxed her defensive posture. Over the following days, an unusual arrangement developed. The two bears shared the stream, with the mother and cubs taking the best fishing spots during peak feeding times, while Goliath fished the less productive areas and hunted during off-peak hours. This cooperation proved beneficial for both parties. Goliath's presence actually helped protect the mother and cubs from other potential threats, while his fishing activities stirred up the stream bottom, making salmon easier for the smaller bears to catch. The cubs, naturally curious, even began to observe Goliath's fishing techniques from a safe distance, learning valuable survival skills. As the days passed, Goliath's condition began to improve. The steady diet of salmon helped him regain weight and strength, preparing him for the approaching winter. But his survival challenges were far from over. The first snow began to fall earlier than usual, and he needed to find a suitable denning site before the harsh Alaskan winter set in completely. The fire had destroyed many traditional denning locations, forcing Goliath to search for alternatives. He explored caves that proved too shallow, investigated fallen trees that offered insufficient protection, and even considered digging a den in areas where the soil had been baked hard by the fire. Finally, Goliath discovered an unusual solution. The fire had created a large hollow beneath the roots of a massive fallen tree, and subsequent rains had washed away much of the ash, creating a natural cave-like structure. With considerable effort, he excavated and modified this space, using his powerful claws to create a den that would protect him through the winter months. As the first major blizzard of the season approached, Goliath made his final preparations. He had managed to gain nearly 100 pounds since discovering the salmon stream, building up the fat reserves necessary for hibernation. His thick winter coat had grown in fully, providing the insulation he would need during the coldest months. Unprecedented fury, bringing winds that howled through the valley like ancient spirits and snow that fell so heavily it seemed to erase the world itself. Goliath had entered his den just in time, sealing himself into the protective hollow as nature unleashed its full winter arsenal above. For the first few weeks of hibernation, Goliath's body performed the remarkable biological miracle that had allowed his species to survive for millennia. His heart rate slowed dramatically, his breathing became shallow and infrequent, and his body began the careful process of living off stored fat while maintaining just enough metabolic activity to keep him alive. But this winter proved more severe than any in recent memory. The temperatures dropped to levels that challenged even the most well-prepared wildlife, and the snow accumulated to depths that transformed the entire landscape. Above Goliath's den, The weight of snow and ice grew so heavy that the remaining structure of his fallen tree shelter began to shift and settle. In late February, disaster struck. A sudden warming trend followed by an immediate freeze created conditions that caused a massive ice dam upstream. When it finally broke, a torrent of icy water rushed down the valley, flooding areas that had been dry for decades. The water seeped into Goliath's den, threatening to drown him in his weakened hibernation state. The bear's survival instincts penetrated even his deep winter sleep. As the frigid water reached his body, Goliath's consciousness fought its way back to the surface. Disoriented and weakened by months of hibernation, he forced himself to move, clawing his way out of the flooding den and into the harsh February night. Emerging into the winter landscape, Goliath faced his greatest challenge yet. His body weight had dropped significantly during hibernation. His reflexes were slow, and food sources were virtually non-existent in the deep winter. The temperature was well below zero, and his wet fur began to freeze almost immediately. But Goliath's intelligence and adaptability once again proved crucial. Rather than panicking, he methodically assessed his situation. He found temporary shelter in a rocky outcropping and used his body heat to dry his fur, preventing hypothermia. Then, drawing on knowledge passed down through generations of brown bears, he began searching for winter food sources that most animals would never consider. He dug through the snow to find frozen berries still clinging to buried bushes, located the winter dens of smaller mammals, and even managed to break through ice to access cached salmon that had been preserved by the cold. Each calorie was precious, each successful foraging expedition a victory against the odds. The mother bear and her cubs, who had also been forced from their den by the flooding, crossed paths with Goliath again during this desperate time. Rather than competing for the scarce resources, their earlier cooperation had established a bond that now proved mutually beneficial. They shared information about food sources through subtle bear communication, and their combined presence helped deter other predators who might have seen any of them as easy prey in their weakened state. As March arrived and the first hints of spring began to appear, Goliath had achieved something remarkable. Not only had he survived the fire, the displacement, the competition, and the harsh winter, but he had adapted and learned. His experience had taught him new survival strategies, expanded his territorial knowledge, and even shown him the value of cooperation over pure competition. When the salmon began their spring run in the now familiar stream, Goliath was there to meet them. He had lost weight and bore the scars of his ordeal, but he was alive, stronger in wisdom if not in body. The mother bear and her cubs, now yearlings, were also there, and their unusual alliance continued into the new season. As Thornfield, the photographer, finally caught up with his subject after the long winter, he found a bear transformed by survival. Goliath had become more than just another brown bear. He had become a symbol of adaptation, intelligence, and the incredible resilience of nature itself. The photographer raised his camera and captured the moment. Goliath standing tall beside the stream that had saved his life, his coat gleaming in the spring sunshine, his eyes holding the wisdom of a survivor who had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. It was an image that would later inspire conservation efforts and remind people of the remarkable creatures that share our world. Goliath's story became legend among the local wildlife researchers, a testament to the brown bear's incredible ability to survive against impossible odds. He had not just endured, he had thrived, learned, and grown. In the harsh wilderness of Alaska, where only the strongest and smartest survive, Goliath had proven himself to be both. The great bear's survival had ripple effects throughout the ecosystem. His presence helped maintain the delicate balance of the recovering habitat. His fishing activities continued to benefit other wildlife, and his story inspired new research into brown bear intelligence and adaptability. As summer arrived in full force, bringing abundant food and warm weather, Goliath had not only survived his greatest challenge, but had emerged as a stronger, wiser bear. The fire that had initially threatened his existence had ultimately led him to discover new territories, develop new skills, and form unexpected alliances. Standing once again at his full magnificent height, Goliath surveyed his domain with the confidence of a true survivor. The scars of his ordeal were hidden beneath his thick, healthy coat, but the lessons learned would stay with him forever. In the unforgiving wilderness of Alaska, he had faced nature's ultimate test and proven that sometimes survival isn't just about strength, it's about intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to keep fighting when everything seems lost. The last stand of Kodiak Ridge had become not an ending, but a beginning. The start of a new chapter in the life of a bear who had learned that true survival means more than just staying alive. It means growing, adapting, and finding ways to thrive even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges.